is on systems of inequalities. You're going to need lots of desk room, so your Chromebook should be up. An inequality is when you have a greater than or less than symbol. That's considered an inequality. So real quick, we're going to look at some inequalities and see if I plug in a point to that inequality, if it is true. You don't need your colored pencils just yet. So I'm giving you this. Y is greater than or equal to negative 2x plus 9. And we're going to see, is this point a solution to that inequality? We're going to plug in the x and plug in the y. If I plug in a y, I've got 4 greater than or equal to negative 2. My x is 7 plus 9. So I substituted in that x of 7, the y of 4, and I'm going to see if this is true. You can type that in your calculator. And I get negative 5. Is 4 bigger than or equal to negative 5?
It's bigger than.
Yep, it is. So yes. So what that means is that 7, 4 is a solution, because when I plugged in the x and the y, what I wrote down was true. Let's try another one.
What's your another one?
3. My x is negative 1, my y is 3. So 3 greater than or equal to
Greater than.
negative 2. We're not there yet. My x is negative 1. So I'm going to go to my calculator and type in negative 2 times negative 1 plus 9.
Miss Johnson, it's burning down. It is very hot in here, bud.
It's starting to feel like I'm covered with bleachers.
How do you do the greater than thing?
You don't, you just type in the negative 2 times negative 1 plus 9.
What I put between the.
You don't put the 3.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And that becomes 11. Is 3 greater than or equal to 11?
No.
No. So, negative 1, 3 is not a solution.
So we don't see by ourselves.
I'm just going to do it with you.
We gotta let us try it.
X and Y.
So I don't understand where you got the map. Is that just supposed to be there? Oh, never mind. That was my fault.
So, Y is negative 5. Greater than or equal to negative 2. My X is 10 plus 9. We're plugging in the X and the Y to this X and Y to see if this is true. So my Y is negative 5. Then I have negative 2. My X is 10 plus 9. I'm going to type that in the calculator to see what that is. It's negative 11. Is negative 5 bigger than negative 11?
Yes.
Yes, it is. So that means that this point is a solution. When we have inequalities, it's not like just two lines where there is one solution. There are lots and lots of solutions. Right here, I found 2 points, and both of those 2 points work here. So when we have systems of inequalities, the way that we figure out what points are solutions, we have to graph them. And I'm going to teach you how to graph these inequalities to see what points work. The first thing you have to know is that when we graph, these symbols are very important. They tell us 2 things. One thing they tell us is when we draw the line, that line might be a nice solid line, or it might be a dashed line. We also are going to be coloring on our graph. Those symbols tell us about that coloring. So this symbol right here is a less than symbol. Notice it does not have the equal to part. Neither one of these do. When your symbol does not have the equal to part, we do a dashed line. So both of these are going to have a dashed line. So normally when you're used to graphing lines, you just do one big solid line. You have to be careful because you won't always have that. Sometimes it'll be dashed. If your symbols do have the equal to part, then it's going to be a solid line. So both of these are solid lines. Now the shading, we're either going to shade above our line and color above, or we're going to shade below. The less than symbols are shaded below. So both of these are shade below. The ones that are the greater thans, those are shade above. When we get to the shading on our graphs, that's when you're going to need your colored pencils. When we graph, we got 2 lines to graph, but with both of those lines, there's going to be some shading involved. So you're going to graph and shade one line before you move on to the next one. So let's look at my first line right here. We're going to graph it like we normally would. What is the y-intercept of this one? -3. The y-intercept, is -3, so we're going to put a point on the y-axis at -3. My slope is -4/3. When you have a negative in front, that negative either goes with the top or with the bottom, not both. When you have a negative on top, that means you go down. The top is up or down, rise. The bottom is run, left or right. What number is on the bottom?
3.
Positive 3. So we're going to go right. So I'm going to count down 4, right 3. Remember, I could go the opposite direction. I could have counted up 4 and left 3. And that should stay right in line. Before you actually draw in your line, is it going to be a dashed or a solid line? Look at your symbol. It's going to be a dashed line. Yep. So I'm going to do, and make sure your line goes all the way across the graph. Now pick up one of your lighter colored pencils and we're going to shade. Am I going to shade above the graph or below the graph? Notice my symbol is this one. It says shade below. It's one of the less thans. So you're going to do this real lightly, and we're not going to take 5 minutes. But everywhere below this line, just real lightly, you can't even really see it on the screen, but I'm shading real lightly, shade below this line. Now, we're going to move on to the next line. What is the y-intercept of my second line? 3. My slope is 2 over 3, which means I'm going to count up to right 3. Up to right 3. Is this line going to be dashed or solid? Dashed. Am I going to shade above or below? Above. Notice this is a greater than symbol. If I find this symbol up top, it says shade above. So pick a different color and shade above. And when you do that, you should notice that there will be a section where your two colors overlapped. The two colors I used were green and orange. So the green, I did my first line. Any point, if I had picked out any point out of this green shaded and plugged in the X and the Y, it would be true. The orange, if I picked any point in this orange shaded region and plugged it in for this X and Y, it would be true. What we're looking for is the section that would be true for both of those. That is this overlap. So you're going to take your darkest color and be a little darker and shade in the overlap. So any point in that darker shaded region would be a solution for both of those inequalities. Now my directions specifically ask about the point 3, 5. That point right there. Is that point in my shaded region?
Yeah.
In my overlap, my dark blue?
No.
No, this point is not in my dark blue shaded region. So 3, 5 is not a solution. The biggest thing you have to know about these types of problems is you have to pay attention to these symbols. You have to be able to match them to know if it's a dashed or solid line, and is it shade above or shade below. So let's look at question number 2. This first line. What is my y-intercept? -2. My slope is what? 1. How do I make that a fraction? Under it. So my slope, because there's an imaginary 1 in front of the x, my slope is 1/1. So I'm going to go up 1, right 1. Up 1, right 1. Is my line going to be dashed or solid? Solid. Notice this is less than or equal to. It has that extra line. If you look up to the chart, we wrote solid line. So I'm going to do a nice solid line. Am I going to shade above that line or below? Below. It's the less than, so that's below. Real light. You just need to barely be able to see it. So barely put any pressure on your colored pencil. Because if I look at your paper, it needs to be obvious to me which section is your final solution. If you're coloring them all in dark, I'm not going to know. So barely put any pressure. That's the first line. The second line. What is the y-intercept? 1, because it has the +1 at the end. My slope is what? -2/1. So I'm going to count down 2, right 1. Solid or dashed?
What?
I heard both. The second line. Dashed. That does not have the equal to part. It doesn't have that extra line. So it's a dashed. Shaded above or below? Above. Sometimes it gets a little confusing. Okay, well, where is above? Especially if your line is steep. So if you take your colored pencil and you put it on your line and you go straight up, that'll give you a good indication of where you should be shading. Because it's not left versus right, it's up or down, above or below. Then if you did everything correctly, this section here on the right, I have both colors in that section. So I'm going to take my third and darkest color and make it obvious that that is my final solution. So any point that's in that dark shaded region would be a solution. So let's look at the point 3, 5. Is that point right here, the point 3, 5, is that in my dark shaded area? No. Let's go to number 3. Are there any questions? All right, this first line, what is my y-intercept?
It's -1.
-1.
Put that thing down there.
My slope, there's an imaginary 1 in front of that, in front of the x. So my slope is 1/1. So up 1, right 1.
We got a solid line too.
It is a solid line because it has this equal to part. It has the extra line under my symbol. That's what makes it solid. Am I going to shade above or below? Above. Because it's a greater than or equal to. So real lightly shade above that line. Then we're ready for the second line. What is its y-intercept?
There you go. Plus 2.
-1.
The y-intercept is the number at the end. 3. Positive 3. What is my slope? -1 over 1. So I'm going to count down 1, right 1. Dashed or solid line?
Dash.
Dashed. Shaded above or below?
Below.
What's above?
This symbol right here is a greater than symbol, so it's shaded above. And if done correctly, the area where it overlaps is this top area. So let's look for the point 3, 5. So 1, 2, 3, up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It falls about right here.
Yeah.
Is it in there?
Yes.
Yes, it is. So 3, 5 is a solution. So if I plugged in a 3 for x and a 5 for y in both of those equations, I would say that they are true.
Let me some Burt's Bees Sweet Violet Tip Balm.
Are you ready for number 4?
Obviously. We got this.
Okay, good. So number 4, the first line has a y-intercept of what?
Plus 3.
3. And a slope of 1 over 2. So I'm going to count up 1, right 2. Or I could go down and left. Solid or dashed?
You're going to have to go dash right here.
Above or below?
You're going to have to go below right here.
The second line. What is my y-intercept?
You're going to have to hit us with a -2 right here.
-2. Somebody besides Brody, what is my slope?
-1.
-2/1. Good. So that tells me I'm going to count down to right 1. Besides Brody and Zach, am I going to have a dash line or a solid line?
It's going to be a solid. Dash.
It's going to be a dash line. This symbol does not have the equal to part. Yep, it is a greater than, so it is shaded above. And then if done correctly, the overlapping region is going to be this right here. I'm not trying to color it perfect, just trying to get my question answered. The 0.35 falls right here. It's close, but is it in my shaded region?
It ain't gonna cut it.
No. 3.5 is not a solution. I want you to work on question number 5 by yourself. This should be your answer to number 5
Don't show me the answer.
and the 0.35. Both of your lines should be dashed. This dark shaded region is the one at the bottom.